Mhm. So we can start with your presentation, Emily.
Great. Thank you so much, Kiara. Thank you so much, Sarah, and to everybody who's here tonight. I am so grateful to get to be here and to speak to all of you. All of us working in the field of nutrition and dietetics, to all the future nutritionists and future dietitians out there. I'm so glad to get to be here. And I hope to share with you tonight a little bit about what it is like to do the kind of work that I do. I have been a dietitian now for, let's see, a little over 15 years. And see, Kiara, did my presentation pop up? Do you all see it?
Sí, ya se ve. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, wonderful. So as you just heard, I've been doing this for a long time. I have spent my entire life, my entire professional life in the field of dance. And I became a nutritionist, I became a registered dietitian. I have both an undergraduate and a master's degree because I wanted to make a difference in the lives of these incredible athletes. Um, let's see here. As you all know, dancers are performing at, let me see. There we are. As you all probably already know, dancers are incredible athletes. I think that they are some of the most highly trained athletes that we have. But the way the dance world works is that they don't always get the nutrition help and the diet help and even the mental health help that they need. So I have dedicated my career to getting to work with these incredible athletes. And when I did my master's degree, I did a major focus in sports nutrition. I had the great privilege of getting to do my master's degree under one of the sports nutritionists for the US Olympic marathoners and the US Olympic gymnast. And I'll show you his work in just a minute. Um, but I just feel like there's such an opportunity for all of us in this field to make a real difference. And I'm excited that you all are going into this profession because I think now more than ever, nutrition matters and the work that we do matters and our messages matter. I just wanted to start with one example. This is a client that I worked with early on, and I worked with her coming back from an injury. And what she said, her words were, in our work together, I learned how to manage my meals throughout my day, and that leading this kind of life, we need smaller meals every 2 hours or so. I was feeding her much more frequently, and it ended up making her have much more energy. And we'll explain more on that in just a second. I taught her how to listen to her body because dancers, we tend to ignore pain, we push through fatigue, we push ourselves very hard. And, excuse me. And one of the most important things I do is teach dancers how to listen to their bodies and how to honor those cues that they need. So, going into this field, as future dietitians or as dietitians, we can use our education for real change. You can make a huge difference in somebody's life. Here's some of the work that I've done over the years. I work with young people, but I also work with professional dancers and college dancers and even semi-professional dancers. Now, it's completely different when you're working with a younger dancer. It's not that different than working with young people in general. You're giving recommendations to support growth, to make sure they have enough energy, but primarily you're educating busy parents. And you're trying to encourage diet variety. In this picture here, I'm getting the kids to eat a kale salad with like mango and cranberries. And trying to get kids to eat greens can often be hard. But the more we can bring food into our presentations and actually show them how delicious good food can be, the more success that I've had as a dietitian. Um, Now, when I'm working with professional or college age dancers, my work changes, my approach changes. I am much more focused on supporting their energy or calorie needs by hour throughout the day. We really look at their schedule and how can I provide recommendations very specific to their needs? Um, Obviously, we're preventing nutrient deficiencies that you all know about. We're preventing disordered eating, we're preventing restricting, and we're challenging common misinformation. There's a lot of internet misinformation out there, and a huge part of my work is trying to explain why maybe what they saw on Instagram isn't always true. And then at the end of the day, they want to just know what to eat. So we have to know a lot of meal and snack ideas. We've got to be able to make a lot of suggestions and do that very quickly. So knowing what they need and like giving them 5 snack ideas, giving them 5 lunch ideas very fast. That's what I have found to be most helpful. I wanted to present to you all tonight 2 clients that I worked with. So I'm going to present 2 case studies and just kind of explain what I do when I'm working with a real life client. This first case study is pretty simple. It's cut and dry, very easy client, I think. The second case study I'm going to present to you is a little bit more complicated. So we're going to call this person Melody. It's a female dancer. She's only 21 years old. But as she was getting ready to graduate from college, she met with me because she had gained quite a bit of weight in just 1 school year. Well, she said it was a lot of weight. It was only 9 pounds, which is not that much weight. But to a dancer in their minds, 9 pounds is a lot. I don't think it's a lot. I'm sure you guys don't think it's a lot. But we have to explain to them that 9 pounds is actually not that big of a deal. She had very low energy. She'd been getting sick pretty regularly and she was having a hard time with her immune system. But she kept telling me, I don't eat much and I'm confused about where this weight came from. She says she's very mindful about carbs. Carbohydrates are often vilified in this population. And then she was very afraid of gluten and told me that she didn't eat gluten for personal reasons. So this is what I consider a pretty simple client. First off, I ask her, well, what is she eating? We meet for, my first meeting with a client is usually an hour and a half. I have about a 90-minute meeting with them because we go over a lot of things. I want to know what their schedule is. I want to know what they're eating throughout the day. So she starts her day with 2 eggs with butter and almonds, and that's it. And then she doesn't have a snack. So between 7 a.m. and 12, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, for 5 hours, that's all she's eating, just eggs and a small handful of nuts. Then for lunch, she has a wrap, basically like a turkey sandwich, but it has mayonnaise on it, which is basically a high-fat spread. But she really is trying. I mean, she had some carrots, and that was good, but she also had some chips, like potato chips. Then at 1500 or 3 o'clock before dance, she's super busy. So she gets fast food. And this is one of her problems. And this is a huge problem in the United States, is the very high caloric fast food intake. So she gets a chicken salad sandwich. Again, she's really trying to make good choices. But because it's fast food, it's pretty high in fat. But she does make good choices. She doesn't get the French fries. She doesn't get a sugary drink. She's trying. Now, by the evening, she's very hungry. So she hasn't eaten enough at all earlier in the day. And this is part of why she was so tired and fatigued. So when she gets home, she starts eating chocolate chip trail mix. And for us here, trail mix is like nuts and seeds and chocolate chips and like little crunchy things. So it's very high in calories, very calorie dense. But she does make herself a dinner. She has some salmon with asparagus, like some vegetables, and she only uses olive oil and a side salad. Again, this is not bad. She's trying. She's a college student, so she's staying up late doing her papers and her homework, so she keeps eating trail mix. So again, this is really not that bad. Like she's getting 1,947 calories, but she's getting 117 grams of fat. So her fat content was way too high, and a lot of this is coming from the fast food and from some of the choices that she was making, the butter, the chips, etc. Her cholesterol was extremely high. Protein was higher than she needs. Carbohydrates, there's no way she was getting enough. It was only 142 grams. So she's over on protein, very restricted on carbohydrates, and not enough fiber. So she's hungry despite getting too much protein. What she really needs was only 1,820 calories because she wasn't really rehearsing that much at that time. For the record, I do have a lot of female clients that are burning like 2,000, 2,200, 2,300 calories a day. So this is pretty low. And she needs about 45 grams of fat, but she's getting more than double that. And of course, we want to focus on fiber. Fiber is everything. Fiber is the key to good health. I know you all know this, but most of my clients don't know this. They have no idea what the word fiber means, and we have to explain it to them. So here's what I told her. I'm like, here's what I want you to do. I want you to start breakfast with some oatmeal, with a whole grain. And I had to explain all about carbs. I had to do a lot of education about why oatmeal is not bad, why blueberries are not bad. I have a lot of dancers that tell me, oh, I don't want to have fruit because it has too much sugar. I'm afraid of fruit. So a lot of my work is battling food fears and trying to tell them, no, it's okay. You should have some fruit. It's okay to have oatmeal. Carbohydrates are good. And we did put some almonds on there and some seeds. And then she wasn't getting enough calcium. So I gave her a cup of almond or soy milk because she wasn't doing dairy. Basically, I just was trying to get some calcium in her. Then I had her bring a snack. She said she would bring a fruit, some grapes, and we agreed on that. Always I'm negotiating with my clients. I'm always asking them, what can you bring? What can you do? I avoid telling them you have to do this or you have to do that. That doesn't usually work. I say to them, what kinds of snacks are possible for you to bring with you? And then we work together on that. With lunch, I gave her beans and rice, again, doing a lot of explanation about protein, about carbohydrates. I gave her a large salad. So this is a very high fiber lunch, but way less fat than what she was getting before. And then I had her make sure you pack your snacks. Eating regularly throughout the day is everything. It's one of the most important things you can do. So I'm like, bring your food with you. Here in the United States, peanut butter and jelly is really popular. It's easy, it's portable, it's very cheap. So it works for college students. And then she ate her carrots and an apple again. And then I had her have another snack, another oat or an energy bar during her breaks. And then for dinner, I gave her a very high fiber pasta. Lentil flour pasta is really popular here right now because it's very high in fiber, very high in protein, high in iron, high in zinc, very low in fat. It's also a great source of carbohydrates as well. I gave it to her with a light tomato sauce and then a vegetable, some broccoli. And then instead of her trail mix, which was very high in calories, I gave her popcorn instead to keep her full while she's studying. So her adjusted plan, we got her back down closer to what she needed. We put her down at 1,864 calories. I got her fat way down to 41 grams. I got her cholesterol way down. Her protein was still high, but that's okay. I'm okay with 1.3 grams per kg. That's actually part of my recommendations. And I got her carbohydrates up. And I got her fiber was way high now. So what she was telling me is that she had way more energy, she was doing a lot better, and then slowly over time, she did start to feel better. She did start to lose a little bit of weight, but it was slow. It wasn't quick weight loss. I'm very careful to never put my clients on a starvation diet. I don't believe in the whole intermittent fasting when I'm working with a dancer or with an athlete. I don't think that's helpful to them. I want them to eat. That's my primary goal. So that dancer ended up doing really well. She actually ended up going to the to Alvin Ailey in New York City. So super proud of her. She's doing really well. Um, but one thing that we have to do as dietitians is we need to make sure our clients, especially if they're athletes or dancers, that they understand that their body weight is not just the food that they eat. Of course, food is very important and that's our main goal, but they need to understand that there's so much more to their body weight than just food. And the reason it's really important to explain this to them is because they tend to get very fixated on calories or fixated on fat. And that can lead down a road towards eating disorders. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. So I want them to understand that their hormones play a role. If they're going through puberty and they're 13 years old, of course hormones are going to play a role. Of course their body is going to change. We've got to normalize that. And of course, hormones are very influenced by our food choices, by different vitamins, vitamin D, for example, of course, and different plants and plant compounds. I talk a lot about hydration with my dancers and different kinds of beverages and how important that is. Energy balance is one of the most important things I cover. And we're going to talk about that in depth in just a second. Energy balance is just meal and snack timing. Sleep is a big factor. Very few of my clients actually get enough sleep. They're usually sleep deprived. And I try to explain that the correlation between sleep and body weight, and sleep and performance, and sleep and mental health. So I know we're dietitians, but we still need to help our clients and the people we work with overall healthy habits. And then fiber. I talk a lot about fiber. Everyone wants to talk about protein. And I've been doing this for a really long time, so I get very tired of worrying about protein. I almost never work with a client who's protein deficient, unless they have a severe eating disorder. But almost all of my clients are fiber deficient. And so I tend to focus my energy there. This is a resource that I use still all the time. This is one of my favorite books on sports nutrition, written by Dr. Dan Benardot, he was my professor at Georgia State University in the Laboratory for Elite Athlete Performance, which is where I got my master's degree. And now he's also with Emory University in Atlanta. So I love his work. I love his research. He's a colleague of mine still today. Highly recommend his book. There's also one of his resources is in Spanish, and I sent it to Kiara so she can send it out to you as well. He says, there is no question that focusing on a diet high in complex carbohydrates, moderate in protein, and relatively low in fat is performance enhancing. So we have to find ways to convince the athletes we're working with that carbohydrates are not the enemy. And when you're working with a population that weight and body, the way their body looks is a factor in their athleticism or in their performing or even in their ability to get a job, we have to address the fact that food fears around carbohydrates are real, and we have to do a lot of education around that. So let's talk about energy balance. Timing is everything. This is a huge part of my research and the work I do with my clients, because I find that if we're not, number one, addressing their schedule, none of our recommendations really matter. We have to give recommendations based on what time they wake up, what time they're exercising, what time rehearsal is, what time performance is. We have to take their lifestyle into account. And you all know this. I know you know this. So meal and snack timing changes body composition. I can raise or lower body fat percentage in the athletes I work with just with meal and snack timing, just when I give them snacks. And there's some great studies on that. There's a few that I put in the presentation that you can look at later if you want to. What we do know is that smaller, more frequent meals or eating regularly throughout the day, roughly 6 times a day, improves performance. It also lowers injury risk and it reduces fatigue. Now, you all know this, I'm sure, but some of the studies I've seen on basketball players is that we can actually lower body fat percentage and raise muscle mass in athletes in just 2 weeks by giving them snacks in between their meals and by making sure that they're not going for too long without eating. And what does too long even mean? Well, let's take a look at that. Here's a graph that we have hours throughout the day. And sorry that I have AM and PM. That's just how we do it here. I hope that's not confusing. You can see on this side of the graph, we have calories throughout the day. And then on the bottom of the graph, we have hours throughout the day. So this is somebody's food pattern for just one day, one 24-hour period. Now, this green line up top and the green line at the bottom, those are based on research. So roughly what we know is that if we can keep people's calories in and calories out and how much calories they're metabolizing within 400 calories positive and 400 calories negative, that's when we see the best performance. That's when we see better body composition. However, nobody actually does that. That's the problem I run into. That's our job as dietitians. We have to take the research and turn it into like actual food eaten throughout the day. So as you can see at 6 a.m., this client here, this is actually one of my dance students in a study that I did. She had a small breakfast, and then she has another meal somewhere around 10. Around 12, she has lunch. Around, say, 4 o'clock, 1600, she has a very small snack. But now she's dancing, she's rehearsing, she's in class all evening. And she's burning a lot of calories, but she's not eating. So she gets below that green line, that negative 400 calories, where her body is burning so many calories and it's not taking enough in. And when we do that, that's when we start to switch our energy substrates. And that's when we start to eat away at our own muscle tissue. You all know metabolism. I don't have to explain this to you, but what we have to explain it to our clients, that when they're not eating, their body has to switch to a different energy substrate. We end up with ketones, we end up with them burning their own muscle tissue, and we end up lowering the resting metabolic rate. So we have to find a way to explain that in real language to our clients. Now, of course, she goes home and at 8 p.m. or late in the evening, she eats a huge dinner. So she's starving, understandably so, and she eats a lot more than she would have if she had just had a snack. So what I explain when I'm working with dancers or when I go do guest speaking is I say, listen, if you're not eating, if you go for more than 3 hours or so, or 4 hours without eating, you're going to lower your lean tissue. You'll have less muscle. You're burning your own muscle. And you all understand adaptive thermogenesis and decreased resting energy expenditure, but we have to explain that in a way that makes sense to these young dancers. And so I tell them it's a little bit like burning your furniture to heat your house. That's basically what that means. And so I'm trying to get them to eat more regular throughout the day. When I talk about backloading energy intake, what I mean is that like they don't eat all day and then they go home and they eat way too much. That often increases body fat percentage and decreased muscle mass over time. Obviously, we all know it increases their risk for injury. Of course it does. That's so clear that when we don't eat enough throughout the day, we're going to get injured more often. But we have to make sure we're explaining that in a way that can be understood to our clients and to our people we're speaking to. So this is another quote by Dr. Dan Benardot. The more frequent the eating pattern, the lower your body fat percentage. And that's usually how I can get the dancers to listen to me to eat. The higher the muscle mass, while stabilizing blood glucose and insulin excretion. And I kind of explain to them, they don't know what stabilizing blood glucose and insulin excretion means. I know you all do, but they don't really. And so I say to them, like, when you feel really hangry, you get really grumpy and mean when you haven't eaten. That's basically what we're talking about. All right, moving on. So, what I want to do with my clients is I want them to stay within 400 calories positive and 400 calories negative. I'm not saying that they have to eat 400 calories. That's not what I mean. I mean that when we are measuring what their body is burning or what they're metabolizing, we're trying to keep them within this 400 calorie range. So we're eating regularly throughout the day. She has breakfast, they have snack, they have lunch, they have snack, they have maybe another small snack and dinner. And then we have to find out what their schedule is and figure out how to fit all that in. I know that sounds really complicated, but mostly what I do is I just like schedule stuff. That's a huge part of my work. So this is how I explain it to my clients. Number one, make sure you're eating at night. Too many of the dancers that I work with, they have this idea in their minds that if they go home from dance and they eat at night, or if they have a performance and they eat after the performance, that all of that is going to turn into fat. And that is such a pervasive, incorrect myth that we have to do a better job with our messaging on that, like explaining that you have to eat dinner when you go home. It's very important. And telling them what to eat, how much protein, what kinds of carbohydrates, what kinds of vegetables. So that's been true. And then helping them with healthy planned snacks throughout the day, making sure they're eating breakfast, telling them, well, what kinds of snacks can you bring? What's available to you? And making sure that they're eating real food, not powders or pills or supplements. I'll have dancers just not eat all day and they'll say, well, I'm taking B vitamins, so it's okay that I didn't eat lunch. And I'm like, no, it's not okay. You still have to eat. What are the B vitamins doing for you if you're not eating? So we have to explain these myths that just taking B vitamins with no food doesn't do anything. So it's fun. A huge part of your work is going to be explaining myths to people. I'm not going to read all this to you. These are just some studies I thought might be helpful that I find really interesting. So you have this in your notes and you all can look these up later. One thing that I try to do is I try to not talk too much about calories or grams of protein or grams of carbohydrate because my clients don't care and that's really confusing. They eat food, not grams. So we have to, in our minds, we have to keep a number in our head. Like, let's say I have a client and she needs 70 grams of protein per day. I don't necessarily tell her, you need 70 grams of protein per day, because that doesn't mean anything to her. She doesn't care. I have to say, okay, for breakfast, I need you to get an egg. I need you to get oatmeal with some nuts. And in my mind, I know about how much protein I'm giving her for breakfast. So we have to get good at translating numbers into food in our heads without confusing our clients too much with that. Okay, so again, kind of on this theme of like we have to do a lot of myth busting and correcting misinformation. We need to teach why carbohydrates are good and needed, and we have to explain, well, what are carbs? Because most people have no idea. At least in the United States. Maybe it's different where you are, but in the United States, people are just clueless about carbohydrates. They think they're bad. So I do a lot of work in this area. So for my clients, I recommend 55 to 60% of total calories come from carbohydrates. That's what I have found works best for dancers. This is American College of Sports Medicine, but I also look at longevity studies. I also look at the research on preventing inflammation and anti-aging. And I always recommend whole grains, legumes, beans, peas, etc., vegetables, fruits, as much as possible. But I educate them on how they work in the body. I don't just say, oh, they're not bad, because they won't believe me. They're like, we saw on Instagram that this dancer ate no carbs and she's really skinny. And we have to explain, no, that's not how it works. Carbohydrates are not going to make you fat. And you're going to have to say that over and over and over and over. You're going to get tired of saying that, but it's important. So don't just tell them that, show them. Say, well, this is what I mean. When I'm talking about carbohydrates, this is what I'm talking about. Because if I say the word carbohydrates to a dancer, they're just picturing cookies, or they're picturing cake, or they're picturing sugar, candy. And we have to show them what we mean by good carbohydrates. Here's another quote from that advanced sports nutrition book that I highly recommend. Of all the ergogenic aids studied, it's very clear that carbohydrates hold the greatest promise for endurance and power performance. This is another client I worked with. She was at the Bavarian State Ballet. She went to Royal Ballet School. She ended up dancing in Finland, actually. She's a gorgeous dancer. And she was having low energy and she was having a really hard time. She wasn't eating very many carbs during the day, during her dancing day. She was a professional dancer, so most of her energy expenditure was during the work hours. And then she would come home and she would eat lots and lots and lots of carbohydrates. She told me, oh, I have all these sugar cravings. I'm addicted to sugar. And I said, you're not addicted to sugar. You're hungry. You're not eating enough during the day. You're not eating any carbohydrates during the day. So you get home and your body naturally starts to crave whatever it can get to raise blood sugar quickly. So I worked with her to give her sources of carbohydrate for breakfast and for lunch and also for a snack. And what do you think happened? You all know what happened because you know how this works. She felt better. She said, I have more energy and I'm not craving sugar as much when I go home. And I'm like, yeah, see, isn't that amazing? So we have to bust these food fears. Okay, enough about carbohydrates. You all know they're important. I don't have to tell you that. Let's talk about everyone's favorite subject, at least in the United States. People are a little bit protein obsessed. For me, I recommend about 15 to 20, maybe 25% of total calories come from protein. Usually it's 15 to 20, but sometimes I'm working with clients who need to gain weight and they need to gain muscle. And at that point, I'll go to 25% of total calories. Ideally, I'd like for my clients to get protein within 30 to 45 minutes post-exercise. You all probably know why. There's a higher level of an enzyme that helps with muscle building and muscle protein synthesis. I really want my clients to diversify their protein sources. All right, they all think protein equals meat. And I want them to understand that protein is much bigger than that. Because fighting inflammation and fighting heart disease are the two #1 problems that we are having in the United States. So if I can get them to have proteins that are beans, that are lentils, that are peas, that are quinoa, that are oats, that are soy, it's nuts, etc., then that reduces inflammation and that reduces the risk for heart disease. Plus, they're much lower in fat, so that tends to work with my dancers because they have to wear tights for a living. Another thing that we have to explain is that just powering eating protein, eating excess protein, meaning more than the body's needs, is not helpful, it's not necessary, and actually can backfire by lowering bone mineral density. So I've had many clients over the years who are so fixated on protein that they're getting way too much and they're not getting enough carbs and they're not getting enough other things. All right, let's talk about this other case study that I think is a little bit more interesting than the first one because it's not quite so boring. This is actually one of my clients right now. I am working with this dancer currently. She is 16 years old and she has a diagnosed eating disorder. She was diagnosed with ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive. But the more I work with her, the more I see this as almost not classic anorexia, but the signs of what she's doing is classic anorexia, but the etiology where it came from is not necessarily classic anorexia. Either way, she has an eating disorder. So my goal for her is weight restoration, focusing on rebuilding lost muscle. She lost 20 pounds in just a few months. So very fast weight loss. She got very sick very quickly. Now, what's interesting about this particular case is that I'm working primarily with her mom. And I'm also working with she's at a really elite performing school here in the United States, like one of the top performing art schools in the country. So I am working more with the parent and with the team. And what happened was this student was in a dorm that had a lot of mold and it was a really old dorm. And the mold triggered her immune system and she developed an autoimmune condition called PANS or PANDAS. She had brain swelling, she had extreme amounts of inflammation, and she had overgrowth of bacterial overgrowth in her intestines. This really affected her mental state, which was fascinating to see how it triggered obsessive compulsive disorder. And the mom says this triggered the eating disorder. I kind of disagree with the mom. I think the eating disorder was kind of already there to begin with, and this just made it so much worse, much faster. So she also has an autoimmune condition. So for me, as her dietitian, I have to focus not just on getting her to gain weight as fast as possible. In fact, I actually don't think we need to gain weight as quickly as possible. I think taking a slow, steady approach, as long as they're safe, as long as their cardiovascular parameters are safe, heart rate, blood pressure, I take a slower approach to weight restoration. But I also have to put her on an anti-inflammatory diet because her gut is inflamed and she has very high inflammatory biomarkers like C-reactive protein, cortisol, etc. I'm trying to get her to 52.3 kgs. And I will tell you that last week she gained 4 pounds, which is, I have to do the math, how many kilograms that is. This
Two.
person's a very, oh, sorry, Kara, were you going to say something?
I know that 4 pounds is 2 kilograms. It's half.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, divide by 2.2. So she is at very high risk for stress fractures because, as you all know, bone mineral density is a major issue. I don't have to explain that to you, of course. So I need to make sure that we don't overfeed protein because of course, excess protein reduces bone mineral density. So I have to keep her protein numbers within a pretty tight amount. And I need to make sure she's getting calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K, and that we're also feeding her regularly throughout the day. You all may already know this, but risk for stress fractures and risk for low bone mineral density goes up just if people are not eating throughout the day. What I mean, and I think maybe I explained that badly, what I mean is that if we have two different dancers and they both get 2,000 calories a day, but one dancer gets it in only 2 or 3 meals, and one dancer gets it in 6 meals, the dancer who only eats 2 or 3 times a day, even though they're getting enough calories, their risk for stress fractures goes up. You guys probably already know that. I don't mean to tell you things you already know. Okay, so what am I recommending? I want her to get 1.3 to 1.6 grams of protein per kg. So I'm giving her 68 to 84 grams. And I'm giving her roughly 4 to 5 servings of protein plus a protein shake in the mornings. Um, I'm working with her mom to craft a recipe for this protein shake because the mom, like lots of eating disorder clients, has a lot of ideas about nutrition and is fearful of many things. She's fearful of soy. She's fearful of carbs. She's got I'm having to educate the mom just as much as I'm working with the client. So when you're working in eating disorders, you're gonna have a lot of patience and you're gonna have to have a lot of understanding. And my recommendation is to take extra classes in counseling skills and in psychology because it will really help you. Okay, so um, her meal plan with protein is important, obviously, but I'm not overemphasizing it. Um, Her appetite is already very low, and I'm having a really hard time getting her to eat regularly. So, as we all know, protein is very satiating. So if I'm giving her excess protein, then it's gonna lead to her not wanting to eat the volume, the amount of food that I need her to eat. Another thing that you all should be aware, and you probably already are, when we are working with eating disorder clients, we have to be very thoughtful about the amount of fiber that we give our clients for a couple of reasons. Fiber is also satiating, it fills you up. So you can get very full on a lot of salad, but that doesn't have very many calories, and I need to get weight on her. So obviously I want her to have fiber from whole grains, fruits and vegetables, but I've had many clients over the years who fruits and vegetables are safe foods in their mind. So they will eat lots of those and they get very full and they say, well, I'm not hungry. And I'm like, but you still are not getting enough calories because you're filling up on just like greens or salad. So we have to walk that fine line. Um, as you all already know, when somebody has been starving themselves for a long time, when we have the absence of food in the intestinal tract, gut motility is compromised. In this case, she was only having 1, maybe 2 bowel movements per week, and still she was feeling very bloated. She said, I feel fat. She wasn't fat at all. But in her mind, she felt that way because her stomach felt very full and bloated. This is very common in eating disorders. So I want her eating fiber, but not too much fiber. And I need to educate on carbohydrates and fats and different carbohydrates to get her gut going again. This sometimes takes several weeks. So if you're working with a client with an eating disorder and they're having a lot of GI issues with bloating and they're saying, oh, my stomach hurts, or I'm having GI issues, I often will have a client say to me, oh, I think I have food allergies. I need to cut out gluten. I need to cut out this, that, and the other. And I'm like, no, no, no. This is not a food allergy. When we are refeeding a client with an eating disorder, they almost always have GI pain, bloating, gas, and decreased gut motility. This gets better, it will resolve over time, but in the short term, they're not happy with you as a dietitian, and you just have to understand that sometimes the dietitian is not a popular member of the medical team. Sometimes they hate me, and I'm sorry, but my job is to get you to eat, and you don't want to eat, but that's literally my job, and so it can be a little tricky. Hydration, same kind of thing, same sort of issues. Obviously, I need her hydrated. This is going to help with the gut motility. This is going to help with her having bowel movements. This is going to help with blood volume. I have to have her vitals checked. I need to know that her blood pressure is okay. I need to know that her heart rate is okay. We all know that hydration and fluid intake play a huge role in that, right? So that needs to be monitored weekly. Um, Fluid intake can compromise food intake. So it's essential to give fluids after meals or in between meals. I can't tell you how many times I've had a client intentionally fill up on liquid and then say, well, I'm just not hungry. I don't want to eat. Well, they drank like a gallon of water before breakfast. So that's just something to watch out for. You all probably understand that monitoring their electrolyte intake through food and fluids is going to be very important when working with eating disorders. Our number one job is to keep them safe while they are in their in refeeding time period and while they're in recovery. So keeping them safe means making sure that their heart function is safe. You all probably know that eating disorders have the number one risk of death and risk of fatality. And a big part of that is because of cardiovascular risk. So let's make sure we're looking at their sodium, their potassium, their calcium, and their electrolytes while we're refeeding them. Document fluid intake, make clear recommendations, and don't let them overhydrate before weight checks. They're gonna try to drink a gallon of water before they get on the scale. They know the tricks. We have to stay one step ahead of them. So again, with this client, we're lowering inflammation and we're trying to improve her immune function because, at least according to her mom, that's what caused her eating disorder. I don't necessarily agree with that totally, but anyway, this is just good healthy practices. So what can we do? The World Health Organization, HSPH is Harvard School of Public Health. They've made strong statements on the carcinogenicity and inflammation causing effects of processed and red meats. So I walk a careful line between not vilifying a food, not saying to a client with an eating disorder, you could never have red meat. I have to be very careful what I say. I have to be very careful to not create more food fears. But at the same time, I know that bacon and red meat is going to increase inflammation. It's going to increase C-reactive protein and cortisol. So we just have to find what moderation means for them. And dancers and eating disorder clients, they're not real good at moderation. That's not a word that they're real practiced at. And so that falls on us to make very careful, thoughtful recommendations without giving them more food fears, but also, no, I don't think she should have bacon every day. We have to walk a fine line. Okay, let's increase foods like greens, berries, veggies, fruits, acai, goji berries, pineapple, lots of seeds, omega-3s in all their different forms, fermented foods, probiotics. And our job is to be able to rattle off very quickly lists of all the different kinds of foods that have these properties. So you just have to know them in your head. Supplement with foods and teas and herbs that decrease inflammation, green tea. There's so many different teas that can work really, really well in this case. Echinacea, nettles, oat straw, turmeric, ginger, lots of ginger, mushrooms, chaga, lion's mane mushrooms, shiitake, reishi. These are all anti-inflammatory and can help a client like the one I'm talking about. It says CDI article. Sorry, that's a Dance Informa article. I write for Dance News International and for online publications. That's what that means. I'm happy to send you those if you want. Okay, we all know that we need to get plenty of fluids in our clients. So we are telling them all about hydration. One thing that I have found worked for me is not just saying, oh, you need to drink fluids, but just saying, listen, the first two things that are going to happen to you when you're dehydrated are fatigue and poor balance. And that usually gets dancers' attention. You have to find ways to get people's attention and to get them to listen to you. And I'm like, you're going to fall off your leg. You're going to fall out of pirouettes. You're not going to be able to balance very well if you're dehydrated. And they all reach for their water bottles. I'm telling you, it works every time. We have to talk to them about energy drinks and caffeine intake. We need to explain to them, okay, sure, yes, caffeine is sports performance enhancing. We have tons of studies on that. We know it's sports performance enhancing, but too much caffeine is detrimental, and here's why. So we have to be able to explain caffeine intake for our clients and how much they need and how much they don't need. And everyone's going to be different. We need to be able to explain to them pre-exercise and post-exercise hydration recommendations. And I have that in another slide. I'm getting there. Hold on one second. We also need to be able to tell them what are electrolytes, because most people have no idea. They know that electrolytes are good, but they don't know what they are or why. So be prepared to explain, well, what does sodium do in the body? You know, what is potassium? Where do we get potassium from? What kinds of foods and beverages do we get potassium from? How are calcium and magnesium at play here? So muscle cramping is often a big issue that I see, not just in exercise, but also with some of the female clients that I work with their monthly menstrual cramps. So the more we can explain about hydration and electrolytes, the better off people do. Okay. And have lots of like suggestions for how to get water and how to get fluids in them, like these pretty drinks that you can see in the picture. Or just filling up your water bottle 3 times a day. Hydration and weight, of course, go hand in hand. We all know this. A cohort study from Harvard found that increasing water intake was significantly associated with less weight gain long term. A major problem that I have in the United States is that we go crazy on sugar in the United States. It's so high that if we can get people to replace sugary beverages with water, that can lower calorie intake by like 4,700 calories a month. You, I, I don't know what to tell you. The United States, we're really bad about sugar intake. So that's a big part of my work. I will go in and do speaking and I will show them in sugar packets how much sugar is in a beverage. You have to show people, because if I just say grams, nobody cares. I have to show them the amount of sugar in some of these drinks. Okay. We know that dehydration lowers blood volume, which decreases athletic performance. It can lead to overheating. This is a major problem with our marathoners and our outside exercising clients. This is also important for dancers, even though we exercise indoors. Lower blood volume, we see an increase in angiotensin. Of course, this makes us thirsty. But those with higher levels of angiotensin are statistically heavier over time. It actually increases fat deposits in adipose cells. So if you're having a hard time getting your athletes to listen to you about hydration and making sure that they're getting plenty of water, just tell them that it increases fat deposits in the adipose cells. That should get their attention. Okay, here's some ACSM guidelines for you. 500 milliliters before exercise. I don't need to read this chart to you. You guys can take a look at this later. I'm gonna send you my presentation. But basically, make sure they're drinking before exercise and during and after. All right. Vitamins and minerals. I have a lot that I talk about and a lot that I work on with my clients. Iron deficiency anemia is something I see a lot. Zinc deficiency is something I see. Of course, you all know that zinc deficiency affects appetite. So when I have somebody with a diagnosed eating disorder, I will recommend a zinc supplement because that can affect their appetite. Now, vitamin D is the most important one, and I don't know that it's the most important one. It's a important one. Is it the most important one? Maybe not. But I highlight it here in my presentation because it's just very common to see a vitamin D deficiency. It is called the hidden epidemic in my field. Studies basically show that pretty much everybody is vitamin D deficient. It's just across the board very common. And we all know that it's difficult to get an adequate amount through food alone. Um, it's so much more than just bone density. Of course, it affects bone density. Most people know that, but they don't always know about vitamin D's role in muscle strength. So that's one thing that I can say to get people's attention. If you're not getting enough vitamin D, your muscles will be weaker. You're going to feel it. Since all of us came through the COVID pandemic, there was so much information on vitamin D and immune function. I know that we've been bombarded with that. So I think for us, it just seems very obvious that vitamin D plays a huge role in the immune system, but most people don't know that. Like just, the clients that you're going to be working with, they're not going to know that. So that's an important thing to highlight when you're working with clients. I typically recommend somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 IUs per day. Obviously, this varies quite a bit. If I have somebody with an eating disorder, those might go up. If I have somebody recovering from an injury or a stress fracture, my recommendations might go up temporarily. It just really depends on the client. Age is going to depend, and what they're doing throughout the day. And also, are they getting sunshine? So 3 kind of key sports nutrition points to remember. When somebody has low blood sugar, they're going to have mental and physical fatigue. So I want them to have adequate fuel before and during exercise. I often am talking about we don't want to do intermittent fasting. I don't want them to do a paleo diet. I want them to eat food before they exercise. And you're going to have people give you every excuse. I'm not hungry. My exercise is too early. I don't have time. I'm too busy. These are all the excuses that you're going to have to be prepared for. And you're going to have a lot of tricks and tools in your toolbox to explain to them. I know you're going running at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I know you don't feel like eating before you go on the run. Can you at least have a glass of orange juice? Could you have a tiny piece of toast? You have to compromise with them and work with people. Meet them where they're at. They're not going to be on the same page that you are, but can you get them to move the needle a little bit? Always explaining about carbohydrates, and of course, hey, muscle's 73% water. Sometimes that helps to explain that to people. This is how to find me. This is my website, my email address. Feel free to message me. That's how I got a chance to meet Kiara. Thank you, Kiara, for reaching out. It was really wonderful to get your email. I get emails from students all the time, and it's always great to hear from people. But basically what I want to say is good luck in your profession. We need more dietitians out there. We need more people doing the work that you're preparing to do. And I applaud you, and I am excited to have more people doing this work. So good luck, everybody. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna close this out and go back to where I can see Kiara and Sarah's face. There you are. Hello.
Emily, thanks a lot. So, we're gonna open up for questions. Entonces, ¿alguno tiene alguna pregunta, alguna duda que le haya surgido durante la reunión? Ya estamos abriendo las preguntas. Someone said thanks through the chat. Geraldine, si quieres abrir el micrófono o si quieres escribir la pregunta por el chat, en inglés o en español, como te parezca mejor.
Dale, gracias. Sí, voy a hacer la pregunta en inglés. Ahí me escuchan bien, ¿cierto?
Sí.
So, okay, hi. And I find it very interesting because nutrition related problems are very common, not only in dancers, but also in like this elite athletes. And I was wondering what was your opinion like about this highly demanding sports where it's necessary to keep like an unhealthy weight, because I practice taekwondo and it's very common to see like very tall people who have to keep such low weights, and it's very impressive, and I like to hear you.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. You're exactly right. There is so much overlap between the research on dancers, which is not very much research, and the research on other athletes where there is a weight component. You mentioned Taekwondo, you're absolutely right. When I was doing my master's thesis research, I looked at some of the nutrition research on judo athletes, same kind of situation. Um, it's very similar to gymnasts. I've also worked with ice skaters as well. There's a lot of overlap, and there's a lot of lessons that we can learn on the research on gymnasts or the research on judo athletes or taekwondo. The overlap that we're going to see is so many similarities, like carbohydrates are good for any kind of athletic activity. Now, the amount might be slightly different, the timing might be slightly different, your protein recommendations might be slightly different if you're working with a very tall male judo or taekwondo athlete versus like a teeny tiny little gymnast. Um, so of course our recommendations change, but the weight component is a very real issue for a lot of athletes, even runners, like even it's it's just a real issue. And so I think that we have to be honest and we have to talk about it openly. And I think what I saw when I was first studying to be a dietitian is that nobody wanted to talk about it. You know, they wanted to just pretend like nobody was worried about weight as as a factor. And I just was like, we have to talk about it. It's like we have to be open and honest and real. And I feel like the more real we are, the more these athletes will trust us. I think they lose trust and they lose faith in us if we try to pretend like it's not a problem or pretend like it's not an issue for them. So the more we can have open conversations, the better I think it will be. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
Yes, thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Voy a dar como un pequeño resumen de la pregunta que hizo Geraldine, perdón. Y fue básicamente sobre la necesidad que los atletas de alto rendimiento, como los atletas de judo, tienen para mantener un peso específico que no siempre es saludable. Entonces, Emily comentaba que es una superposición que hay entre los deportes de alto rendimiento y la danza, donde es un gran problema el control de peso y esta restricción que se hace, y que lo que se debe buscar hacer es hablar del tema, no ignorarlo y no tapar el sol con un dedo, sino intentar hablar sobre eso y también generar una confianza en los bailarines o en los atletas para que ellos también puedan hablar con nosotros y que se haga como un abordaje desde esa confianza. Listo. ¿Alguien más tiene una pregunta? Ah, Sara, tú.
Okay. Do you hear me well?
yes.
All right. Thank you a lot for your time. I find this very interesting because me myself, I studied ballet for a long time, and for that reason, I did like a little survey in with my friends, and I noted that there are the same problems like hydration, fear of carbs, fear of gaining weight, and all that stuff. I have two questions. The first one is that I noticed that you didn't include milk in like in your recommendations. I wonder why.
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. Um, I over the years, I used to be a big fan of dairy milk, specifically milk from cows, bovine milk, and cheese, because I was taught all the same things that we're all taught. It has calcium, it has protein, it has vitamin D. Well, vitamin D is added in the United States, doesn't have vitamin D.
Mhm.
And it's very popular food here. So in my experience, most of the people I'm working with are getting a lot of dairy products.
Mm.
Over the years, being a dietitian, and really over like the last 5 or 6 years, there has been study after study, or just one thing after another, that I have seen that has given me some concerns about cow's milk. Its relationship to autoimmune conditions, the protein casein, and it being problematic with increasing cancer rates, specifically breast cancer and colon cancer. Um, I realize that a lot of that information is currently controversial. And in the United States, at least, the dairy industry is very powerful. They have a lot of money. So I have to be very careful what I say. So I tend to not say very much, and instead try to promote the idea, just the nutrition fact, that calcium comes in lots of different foods. It's not just in dairy. And also promoting dairy alternatives, as they're more sustainably produced environmentally. It's better for the planet, it's better for the cows, obviously. So from an environmental and an ethical standpoint, I think that there's so much more, there's better alternatives. So I'm not a huge fan of dairy. I know a lot of the clients that I work with, they have too much dairy, their skin breaks out, there's a lot of acne. And nobody wants acne, but especially performers. So I find that if we can reduce their dairy, their skin clears up. It's really interesting. Um, I work with some Broadway folks as well. My daughter's a singer, and I notice that when they have too much dairy, they tend to get congested and have like sinus issues. So if I can make sure that my client has enough calcium, enough protein from other sources, then I would like to recommend those sources. But like the girl, the 16-year-old eating disorder dancer who I was talking about, she's eating a yogurt every day and she's putting some cheese in her dinner. And I'm like, great, good, good for you. Like, I'm not going to tell her, I'm not going to add food fears to her. Like, hey, cheese has a lot of calories. Great. Knock yourself out. Have cheese because I can get a lot of calories in you with that. Um, so yeah, it's a line I walk.
All right. Thank you very much. I have another question. I would like to dip in. I mean, I, I understood that your like the way you measure progression in in your patients are with weight, biochemical markers, and how they are feeling. I would like to dip in the anthropometrical assessment. Maybe if you take some skin folds or just by weight, or I don't know. I would like to know.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. That's a really good question. I don't do skin folds. Well, I used to use a bioelectrical impedance scale. So I use a scale that measures total body water and body fat percentage. Now, nowadays, since just a little bit before the pandemic, I transitioned my practice to be totally telehealth. So only a few of my clients I am seeing in person these days. Most of it is virtual. So I am relying on somebody else to get a weight for me. Now, when I'm dealing with an eating disorder client, I don't want them to weigh themselves. So I'm relying on the psychotherapist. And I should have said this. I meant to say this earlier. Kiara and I were talking about it. I always work as a team. I am the dietitian. There's three of us usually, and there's the therapist or psychotherapist or counselor, and then there's a medical team member like a nurse, nurse practitioner, or a doctor. And depends on the case. So it's really important to me to always work as a team. So I am usually getting a weight from another team member. In the case of the 16-year-old I'm working with right now, she is seeing a nurse every week and she's getting her vitals checked. Her heart is being monitored and she's getting weight checks. She's also seeing her therapist like 3 times a week right now. So for my own liability, but also just to make sure that my clients are taken care of, it's essential that I work as a team and they do the anthropometrics. I don't do those anymore. But I used to really like having the bioelectrical impedance scale because I try to talk about it's not just a number on a scale, you're not just a weight. Body water plays a role, body fat percentage can change. And I'm always trying to explain to my clients, like, you're so much more than just a number on a scale, and that number isn't the only parameter that defines you. It's not the only way we define success.
All right, that's amazing. Thank you very much.
¿Hay alguna otra pregunta? ¿Alguna duda que les haya quedado durante la reunión? ¿Algo que le quieran decir a Emily? Pues, I have a question. And is, great, Miri. What can you tell us about the theory that eating several times a day is stressful for the body, a precursor to an insulin spike? Oh, that's an interesting question. Because throughout all your presentation, you said how it was important for the dancer.
Yes, thank you. This is good. This is good. Actually, what we see when we see an insulin spike, that is a bigger problem when people don't eat. Like, let's say 4, 5, 6 hours, right? So if somebody hasn't eaten for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, maybe they skip breakfast completely. Maybe they're not eating for 12 or 13 hours because they were sleeping prior to that. We actually see a bigger insulin spike when we feed them after a period of starvation or a period of fasting than we do when we eat. If we, like, let's say I have perfect client, I can feed this client every 3 hours perfectly throughout the day. We have lower insulin spikes than when we have a period of fasting and a period of eating, usually excess. Even if it's not excess, that's when we see the insulin spike. So that's one of the reasons we see increased body fat stores when somebody is not eating throughout the day compared to if I can eat every 3 hours or so. And I'm assuming that when I'm feeding somebody every 3 hours, that they're moving their body. You know, I work with active people, usually, not always, but usually. So I am assuming that they are using those calories, that they need that energy, and that the pancreas is producing insulin at a normal way, and that they're not metabolically compromised. Like, I've only had like 2 clients over the years that had metabolic syndrome, that were obese and that we had to work. So thank you for asking that. I think that how insulin is produced in the body, that's an important topic. We really do need to look at that. Of course, the food choices matter. I feel like you all know that though. Like, if I feed somebody just like plain white bread versus if I give them like oatmeal or like something with protein, Obviously, the insulin spike is completely different depending on what foods we choose. Glycemic index is going to play a role here. So that's when our judgment as dietitians comes into play. We need to know what's our goal. If my goal might be to give them food that gets absorbed really fast, because maybe we're doing Swan Lake. Swan Lake's a 3-hour ballet. It never ends. It's torture, y'all. I've done Swan Lake with like 4 different companies. You have 2 intermissions with Swan Lake. And if you're one of the swans, which I've done multiple times, you are exhausted by the end. So that last intermission, right before you're about to go on before Act 4, Act 4 is all swans. You're tired. It's now like 9:30, almost 10 o'clock at night. When was the last time you ate? You probably ate dinner at 6. So for that last intermission, when you have a little break, I would love to get something in those dancers that gets absorbed very quickly. But Act 4, what is it? 15, 20 minutes? That's all it is. So I only need them to have energy to get through 15 or 20 minutes. But I do want them to eat something there during that last intermission. Does that make sense? Like, it just really depends on what we're about to do, and it depends on like how long ago they ate. Anyway.
In respect to the timing, I had a question and it was before the classes. What have you seen that works for a dancer? How much time before a class is good to eat that big snack or that meal?
Yeah. I think it sorry to be annoying and say it depends. That's so I hate that answer. But it depends. Is this a dancer who's a young dancer and she's going in and she's taking just a ballet class? Is it only an hour and a half? Or is this a professional level dancer and like their energy needs are going to be totally different? So I think general rule of thumb is to eat, within an hour prior to exercise. I think it kind of needs to be sooner though. I think it needs to be like 30 minutes prior to that class. And sometimes I'll even tell dancers, let's say for example, class is at 10 o'clock and they eat breakfast at 7 a.m., 7 in the morning. By 10, they're already starting to dip with their energy. So I say to them, can you have a banana right before you walk in? Can you have a little energy bar, a little oat bar? Can you have like a little, like, a small piece of bread or like a little half sandwich? Or can you have like a juice smoothie that has a little that I know is going to be digested pretty quickly, because juice, it gets digested pretty fast. A banana digested pretty fast. Bread digested pretty fast. I've given them breakfast at 7 and then a small snack right before class starts. That should get them through an hour and a half. But yeah, I want them to eat so that maybe their class is 2 hours. If blood sugar goes up and down roughly every 3 hours in a highly trained dancer, and their class is 2 hours, and they ate 2 hours ahead of time, their energy is down by the time that class is the hardest, right? Sarah knows, like when you're doing Grand Allegro at the end, you're jumping, you're turning. Your teachers are like, do it again, do it again, do it again. That's when your energy needs are highest. But if you haven't eaten for 3 hours, you're tanking. So you might need to eat something very small and easy to digest right before you walk into class.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think there are no more questions. Ya no hay más preguntas, entonces Pues a los asociados y asociadas les quiero agradecer por estar hoy en esta charla tan interesante y haber participado activamente. Y para Emily, I'm so thankful for your response first to my emails and for your response to this invitation and all the knowledge you gave to us today. Because as I told you before, it is a topic that is not talked about a lot, especially not in our universities. It's something you have to search for in other spaces. So I was really thankful that to have a professional in this area that has so much experience with dancers and their nutrition, and that you were so available and uh, so kind to teach us.
Well, muchas gracias for having me. I promise I'm working on my Spanish. I told Kiara I'm learning Spanish. I'm going to try, maybe next time I come, I can do half of it in Spanish. I'm trying. But thank you for having me, and I wish you all so much good luck in your professions and in your work. Like I said, I do think that this is a really important profession, and I think we need more people out there doing it. So I know it's hard. Keep up the great work. It's a very difficult study to get through your degrees and to get through all your certifications. It's so hard, but don't quit. Keep going. All
Uh,
right. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a very good night. And again, big thanks to Kiara for making this all possible and all your hard work translating all of my information. That was a lot. Thank you.
yes, and I know. Thank you for all the material. I will send them the all the material you sent us. Hay varios links y varios materiales que Emily nos ha compartido durante estos meses. Hemos estado en contacto desde febrero. Entonces, al correo que enviaron por el formulario, les estaremos mandando a los asociados y asociadas los materiales que Emily nos ha compartido para que tengan el acceso a esto. Asimismo, pues al final de la presentación ella nos mostró sus redes sociales, pero también les vamos a mandar las presentaciones, tanto la versión en inglés, la versión original, como la versión en español, para que la tengan a su disposición. Yeah, I was telling them I was gonna send them all the material you gave us.
Okay. I understood. I did understand a little bit of that. I'm trying. I'm learning. Thank you.
Yeah, I need to speak a little bit slow.
Yeah, that was a lot for me. But I'm catching a lot of the words. So I'm going to keep practicing my Spanish. Thank you all very
Yeah,
much.
that's great. And if you decide to come to Colombia, then you will have a lot more time to practice, and we will give you a huge welcome here.
Thank you. It would be a joy to get to come to Colombia. I love to travel, and it would be truly a joy to get to come visit. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay,
take care and good luck to all of you. Thank you and good night.
Thank you a lot. Have a good night. Chao a
All
todos.
right,
chao a
chao.
todos.
Chao,
Muchas
Adiós.
tía.
gracias por
Gracias.
todo. Thank
Muchísimas
you.
gracias.
Ya puedes terminar la grabación, Sara, para que...
En end. Ay, no,
Sí.
ya. Sorry. Sure.